Now you're on.
Now I'm up. All right, thank you. Okay, I will call this special workshop together here in the Grand County Commission Chambers, May 27th, 2025 at 8:30 a.m. Those present are all commissioners, Commissioner Hedin, Commissioner Adler, Commissioner McCurdy, Commissioner McGann, Commissioner Martinez, and Commissioner McCandless, and myself, Commissioner Winfield, with our County Attorney Stephen Stocks, Administrator Mark Tyner, Clerk Auditor Dave Wojtek, with Stephen Bowles sitting in the audience currently. So I will open this up and we can start. Or do we want to start here, Gabe?
Yeah, I can kick things off according to the agenda that's
Okay.
posted, and we'll have Stephen start with an overview, update on revenue trends, as we just did receive revenues, that hit this month. So if I could share my screen right now, it's disabled, so I'll just, for our team.
Sure. Sorry, Gabe, go now.
Okay, so as I just said, we did get another month of sales and use tax revenue that hit the PTIF account, which gives us another further update as to how we're looking as far as those revenues that are budgeted for the 2025 year. And I'll introduce or welcome Stephen Bowles as he tracks and compiles these numbers and updates the data here. I'll give him a few minutes as needed to give an overview of where we're at.
Awesome.
All right, Stephen, if you want to step on.
But yeah, I was just logging into the Zoom, but you have it up, right?
Yeah, I can. There's 2 pages. So you need me to scroll to the second time.
All right. All right, so the top graph right there, the chart shows our actual revenue, tax revenue collection against what we planned in the 2025 budget on 12/17. So we had a better month last month. We took our deficit or our what we've actually received against what we planned to receive up from minus 392 to minus 250.
This is, so if we got that in May, this was actually tax return in March. Okay, great, thanks.
So the Jeep Safari. You know, you can see how that our tax revenue went almost straight uphill there. But we're still down.
Yeah.
There's 2 metrics I want to throw out, means we are 5% below what we expected to receive at this point in time. Sorry. And last month we were 12% below what we expected to receive at this time. So we cut half of that out. Good news, but I'm not a forecaster of what's going to happen in the next future month.
You said March though, right? Not April? Because
It's March.
Jeep Safari was in April this year, not March.
Oh, all right. Well,
So, just checking right there, because
that's good. So, and if I were to use, all right, so in the little, the second graph there, you can see under the 2025 year-to-date forecast, we are now projecting a minus 0.8, so just about a minus 1% contraction for the rest of the year. And this is just math. And a lot of times people calculate year over year or other types of numbers, and the numbers can go wildly divergent depending on who calculates this. I use a 3-year, 12-month moving total. So 3 years from June to May, and then another 3 years, June to May, and it'll go out and then do an average of that. So So revenue is, forecasted at about a -1% growth for this year. But we are just 95% or 95 cents on the dollar that we plan to receive, we have actually received. Best way I can describe revenue trend. And you just said, who knows? I'm so, every month I'm excited to see what tax revenues come in, because I go downtown just like you guys too, and see like, this is crazy, and maybe we'll pull it out, but this is just.
I mean, that we can kind of make that general assumption that we shouldn't freak out. We shouldn't freak out over a couple months of data. I mean, it's a great, it's great to look at those numbers. It's great to be very cautious, but we shouldn't freak out. Like you said, you use in general years of data.
Yep.
So
And I don't think anybody's freaking out. I think we need to be realistic.
I was making a comment to Steve.
Here,
I
so,
was making a comment to.
yeah. Go ahead, Steve, carry on.
Okay, and we had decided earlier that we would use the most recent revenue forecasts or actuals as our guidance for the next year's budget. So if I had to put anything on what I'm seeing here, is that we would be cautious and that they're flat or maybe even slightly a slight contraction in budgeting for next year. But of course, I think that's why we're here, is to determine what needs to be done with the budget. But right now, I would say that you need to watch our revenue come in and make adjustments in the next budget year. Or if we see further contraction, decide if there's anything immediate that needs. But anyway, that's the revenue side of things. On a positive note, and I know there's a lot of numbers, a lot of charts.
Can I ask a question on this right here?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so on that table that you're talking about, now did you average out the percentages there, or did you average out the totals right there to come?
I do the percentage, so I do the 3-year moving total.
I know,
Then I have
talking about
22, 23, and 24, and I do average those.
You're talking to reach to all, right, Brian?
Hold on, well, I'm specifically.
Weighted.
Hold on one second.
Which line are you on, Brian?
Let me explain real quick, guys. Okay, so I'm talking about the second graph that you were originally talking about, right?
Yep.
My only question is this an average of the percentages, or is that an average of the totals right there?
It is.
That 0.8 that you come up with, an average of the totals
Go.
or an average, because it would make quite a bit of difference. Because
And
like you look at restaurant taxes 4% up, but that's a very small portion of our actual tax base.
Quite well.
No, okay, actually, I'm gonna look,
Yeah.
because I'll tell you what,
That's really-
I've had arguments with, or not arguments, but debates about how that's calculated.
I just had a question.
And
That's a good point, right?
it is, it's that is a great question.
Nobody wanted to sit in the front row. Almost all of you are in the back row.
It's individual averages by tax type. So each tax is averaged individually. And then, so it's the sum, it's the weighted average of all of the tax types. So if we had a 10% in car rental tax, and that was the lowest revenue generator, it only gets the average. It's weighted.
It's weighted. That's my only question.
Great.
Okay, so I was gonna say, actually go to that next. Here, we don't have final expenditure data for May because we're still in the period, it takes a while. So revenues are down, but expenditures are down as well. I think a big part of that is from, unfulfilled positions or just general spend. So it's fair to say that, revenues down, but expenditures. I'd say we're probably net even, maybe even a little bit positive. I think our expenditures are down more than revenue.
but we don't have May in there yet.
But for a projection for next year, we can't assume that we're going to have vacant seats in this county as we are trying to hire, so that's.
Yeah.
That's kind of an irrelevant number in my mind. We have to look at that budget as if we were full of staff.
Yes, it was just a point or a fact.
Right. Yeah, just at this point in time right now.
Yeah. Let's see. All right, that's kind of the revenue expenditure overview.
Okay,
And
so that was the first item on the agenda, and then we'll move into sort of the meat of the topic today. So I created this summary of a number of things, a few items in particular that I think are important to address at this moment.
And Dave, is this on number 2, is this the first attachment, the grand fiscal impact? Or no, sorry.
Let's see, it's called,
Wanna pull up.
Updated revenue.
it starts with the date, it's
Okay.
5/27/25.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so there are 3 main topics is, making sure that we're coming into compliance, with TRT expenditures. There's just a broad overview of all of the unplanned expenses that have been approved, to date, as there have been a number of them. And just seeing what the overall impact of those expenditures are, especially in comparison to what our fund balances are. And then just a look at also capital project expenditures that have been approved or are pending. And again, just to kind of have a look at the bigger picture. So kind of we know what we're committed to, and maybe we can get some direction as far as what more information is requested at this time as we move forward through a careful and detailed amendment process to sort of memorialize these approved expenses in a sort of a fresh budget document moving forward. So I'll start from the top. I added a little key at the top just so we can be a little bit more precise about what we're talking about in terms of transient room tax and the current statute associated with the allowable use, as well as some changes that are going to be happening on July 1st due to House Bill 456. And so what we have here is the budgeted expenses for the 2B to 2D or 3B to 3D after July 1st. So that's what is commonly referred to as the mitigation side. That's this 5.2 million here, and then we have a sum or a sort of an exposition of where that 5.2 million comes from in green. The updated projection through the course of this year due to the statutory change in House Bill 456 is in blue. And so that there's the percentage for that 3B, 3D side goes down. And therefore that 5.2 that we projected for the beginning of this year goes down to that 4.99. And this is also, this maintains the revenue projection that we started the year off with. And so that projection, it could be decided that, it might still be early to update that projection. We have a couple strong months coming in. And so it could be decided that standing pat where we are with that projection is the best course forward for now, until we get into the regular budget season in the latter half of this year and the end of year amendment to account for that. But it appears that there will, because of that decreased percentage allocated to that side of TRT, it does look like there's a shortfall, or I do project a shortfall of 214,612. And so that's what we would.
Just at one point, I'd like to kind of go over that with you, Gabe.
Sure.
You can continue. I mean, I don't want to slow you down.
Oh, no, this is a good stopping point if you want.
Is it? Yeah, okay. So first off, so when the original numbers that you kind of gave, when I put together the table right here, it looked like we were looking at a shortfall of 1.2 million. Right there. And then after you added in the initial budgeted the budgeted expenses and the earned interest right there. You had come up with a funding short gap of 877,000. That was your projection on, I think you did that one on 5/15. Right there.
Right.
And so I'm just wondering how we went from 877 shortfall to 200 to 200. I just want to make sure that we're not.
Isn't the 200 simply the shortfall due to the changing of the TRT statute?
Yeah, and that's why,
But previously he had considered other inputs, right?
And so what happened there is in this analysis that I'm displaying on the screen right now, the tourism and rec facilities, and so that it also factors in, so this 877 that I had come up with, it factors in the not just the 3D, this mitigation side, but it also factors in the 3B. And so the second part of this current slide that we're on, it'll account, we'll see an accounting for the
okay, so
shortfall.
it's a different presentation.
Yeah, it's another way of looking at the same numbers, I would say, for sure. Yeah. And
I'll
so,
let you continue that. I just had a question on that.
no, that's definitely fair. And so we'll go to this next place shaded yellow, and that's budgeted expenses for TRT 2A2, which is for establishing and promoting recreation, film production, and conventions. And
What possible to blow yours up, Gabe,
let's see, I think maybe the full screen mode isn't our best.
Go, yeah.
That's better.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's a lot.
And so here we have budgeted expenses of recreation, film production, and conventions of 459,990, and that is pulling out the amount budgeted, the amount to budgeted for recreation or for trail ambassador salaries. And so that's made up by the allocation to the Film Commission, the allocation to the Recreation Special Service District, and other activities that go to Grand County Active Trails and Transportation, the amount of 100,648. And so that's where that 459,990 number comes out.
Stephen, I got a question for you. On here, right here, it says the office, this is the audit findings right here. The office still does not show the county's view that trail ambassador activities. And I'm just, the word that I'm in question there is activities. Does that include salaries or is that programming? What's your interpretation? I mean, because that's basically what you'll have to defend if it comes down into an audit. Is that correct?
Yeah, and you're talking about that $100,000.
Yeah, just getting at that $100,000 right now, because it's got salaries on there. I'm just questioning, is it just salaries or is it salaries and
Benefits as well.
benefits and then also the programming as well?
And when you're saying programming, you're referring to specifically,
It's all the expenses, like if I was looking at we have just all the expenses right here that they have listed under for their TRT rec and film. So you have, hardware for organizing, Easy Up, Steward stickers, bingo, bark, plastic bags, first aid, all of the expenses on there basically.
so if we're looking, and are you looking under the context of 456 or are you looking back?
I'm looking back right now.
Yeah,
I think that's what we're talking about right now is that 100,000 is the back payment.
yeah, so as always, the closer we can tie any of the expenditures towards the specific things that fall within the promotion, it's going to be easier. So I think salaries are closer to it, benefits. I think I think there are arguments that you could make for benefits to be included in that. I think it's Understandable that somebody that you're going to hire, they're going to receive some amount of benefits. But I think the further away that you get from the act of promotion or the act of encouraging other individuals to come to the county, it becomes harder. So do I think salary, of course, yeah, that's easier. Benefits, I think you can make the argument for it. But the further away you get from it, the harder it's going to be.
So I mean, and so who is gonna ultimately have to defend that position? Is that gonna be Gabe? Is that your position, or is that gonna be Stephen, your position that you have to defend if we get audited on this? Or well, actually when, because I'm sure that because we have to list in all of these expenses.
So it's both. I mean, the auditor is in the position of making sure that the expenditures that we make fall within the compliance of the statute, and then that's my job, of course, to defend the county. I think the less creative we are on expenditures, the easier it is going to be to defend. I think that's within the purview of the county to make those decisions. The commission makes the decisions and binds us to policy, and then the auditor makes sure that we are compliant with that and make sure that those expenses are within that purview. And then my job is always to defend the county. Now I will have to encourage the commission and at times the county itself to make sure that we're making the proper expenditures, and attorneys generally are more cautious than
Like saying the responsibility then falls on this commission, on this body, right?
Of course, yeah.
You actually make the decision on if these are promotional expenses or if these are non-promotional expenses.
With the help of state.
Sure, yeah, with advice and counsel from the auditor and the attorney, yeah, the commission's ultimately responsible for the budget, they're responsible for the expenditures, it's your guys' ability and it's within your purview to make the decisions on how we're gonna spend money. But remember, there are restrictions to how you spend funds, and there are limitations to that, especially in this context with TRT. This is something that's come up repeatedly, and so we've had some input from the state auditor's office. I think their position is in the letter. They continue to make decisions based on that and push on certain provisions for that. And so that's where we have to make sure that we are making wise decisions, and the easier and closer we are to the underlying goal, the easier it is to defend.
So just so I'm, I just want to know, so what would be your recommendations to and I'm just looking at the budget here is general program materials or the education incentive items. Would you recommend that those are promotional items, or do those bring people in? Or how should we look at that? Where's your advice lie?
Well, without, these general items, I think it's a little bit closer to what the program is. What particular are we talking about? I can't just say carte blanche, programs are going to be a defensible expenditure, and I can't say that all are going to be. So it depends on what the program is. Without having that information, I can't just say yes or no. I think the overall policy that the committee said is to say, hey, we want to be closer to the underlying rationale of this, and then staff carries that through. That's what the goal of the commission is to set policy and then expect, staff and to make sure that those expenditures are there. So we want to be cautious when we do that. So my suggestion would be, when we look at programming, make sure the programming falls within that circumstance. If there are questions on that, I'm happy to talk about it. Unfortunately, some of those conversations are best had in an email to me. And the reason why is the county wants to make sure we're making good, intelligent decisions, and we want to make sure that they're making those decisions with advice from counsel, and that's why we can raise the question and have the conversation. But the commission does set the policy, so if there are things you guys want to see that fall within that as a more cautious or more aggressive approach on that viewing of that definition, that's your guys' decision.
Thanks.
And so just for my clarity, because I'm not quite following the two of you, we're talking about the 100,648 and whether that is programming.
No, let me explain here. So right there, Gabe was just talking about that in the yellow, it says GCAT does not include trail ambassador salaries of $100,000.
Right, that's the line that I was asking.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Okay.
Right there. And my question is, are we only including salaries on this? because when I looked at the audit right here, the findings, it says activities. And so that's why I was trying to get an opinion from Stephen on what is activities? Does that include the program materials and the education incentives, or is that going to just be, is that just salaries? I wanted a clarification on where we actually sit on.
I understand.
Yeah.
Gabe, I'm reading this as that there's $100,648 of money for the rec, the establishing the 2A2. That's included, that $100,000 is included in the money we're paying. And so what does that $100,000 include? So it's not including the salaries.
Not including
That-
employee costs, and to clarify, it is salary and benefits, and sorry for being imprecise with the language. So that doesn't include employee costs associated with trail ambassadors, but as Brian is saying, that there are program materials and costs that are associated with employee costs that are encompassed within that 100,000. I don't have a precise preparation of data to break down that exact 100, but that can certainly be a follow-up item. I would say, since the standard applied to 2A2 funds is that it must attract transient guests to the community. I don't have any confidence anymore that the allocations to the Recreation Special Service District are an allowable use of those funds. So my assumption now is that this would have to be taken out of the budget, and that we would also have to reimburse that contribution made historically for the past few years. Because that is an allocation that's used to support local youth sports, clearly not attracting transient guests to the community. And so with that standard applied, I don't have any confidence in that being an allowable use at this point.
And you're talking the $137,000.
Yes.
Right now, yes, okay, thank you.
That's been a historical allocation for some years now.
Quite a few, as long as I've been on the commission.
Yeah.
Mike, I have a question for you. Do you know about what percentage that is of their budget? What, don't you?
15. I mean, quick math, 13-15%.
10%.
I thought it was considerably more than that.
I'll pull up their budget.
And so just to follow up on that 137, Gabe, are you going to clarify that?
It sounds like, in the process of clarifying that 100 and what is, this entire conversation about
Sure.
2A2 uses. I think that there should be at least a commissioner, the attorney, and I'm happy to obviously provide information to frame that conversation as needed.
I have a question for Stephen, actually. In the past, for a long time, when we asked for clarification from the state auditor about how we could use our TRT money, they generally referred us back to our own county attorney.
Right.
And the previous county attorney, and I understand we're in a totally different situation, had put out a memo at one point. I think it was actually right before I got onto the commission, but and I was wondering how comfortable you'd feel doing the same thing, or how you feel your role is regarding that conversation. I know you just answered that question with Brian.
No, I'd be happy to put a memo. I can pull that previous memo up. I think that's helpful for the commission. Again, our job is, well, the attorney and the auditor's job is to kind of help guide or advise, not necessarily guide. You guys can choose where you're driving, but give some direction to where you can go within compliance with the statute.
Right.
But I do think the one kind of odd thing with this circumstance, unique thing with this circumstance, a lot of times you're going to have the attorney's opinion, and then you're going to have, like, if we have a court ruling or if we have some other third party that says what their opinion is going to be, that does kind of change the way we look at our advice, because it's, we may have an argument to be right, but if we were stuck with the local court decision, then that's what it is. And
Totally agree. Yeah, I know, I understand that.
Right.
And is that memo that you're referencing specifically regarding this instance, or is it something else?
No, it was a memo that informed kind of our spend. I think it was written, when was it written? 2019, 2020? Mary was the only one on the commission at that point, but that the previous county attorney had written to give us guidance on TRT spend. And that's readily, it was actually part of the audit. I think it was some of the materials that were included in the audit.
That's correct. That's correct. And that was one item, I think at one of the hearings that they had heartburn about was commissioner, or not commissioner. At one point, Chris Baird was a commissioner, that his response to her opinion on that.
Right, I think I remember that a little bit, yeah.
So I think that was that, yeah. So that, yeah, I'm happy to update that memo.
Go ahead, right,
Thanks.
20%.
Steve.
What's that?
20% this year, depending on interest rates, should be right at 20%. For 2025, 2024, it was just over.
That's a significant.
Yeah.
Part of the budget.
Fifth.
And one thing that I think is relevant to the conversation, and that the relevancy of it may change now that the person who is holding the office of the state auditor is different, is that the negotiations throughout last year, throughout the audit process, they were fluid and they did involve compromise.
Yeah.
And so it could have been that Auditor Dougal last year decided that as a way it might have been, there might have been an element of an olive branch that Auditor Dougal extended to the county to say, hey, this is the element that you have to reimburse, and the rest is gray enough that we'll accept it. And so I'm not saying that like, obviously it's kind of a new ball game at this moment, but that could help to explain why certain things were asked to be reimbursed and others not. I think it's important to say that.
But the salaries were asked to be reimbursed.
Correct.
And I do remember that Mr. Dougal worked hard to fit us into whatever parameters we could to help mitigate that amount of money we had to reimburse.
Okay, so in the orange shaded, there's a 300,128, and that represents, under the current statute effective until July 1st, the amount of TRT 2A2 funds that will still have that tag on them, and thus would still be available to support the uses that are allowable under that statute, which I think that there's a lot of question marks about what is even allowable under that statute right now. At least I can speak for myself in saying that. And so with those still budgeted expenses using that bucket of 2A2 funds, less the amount through July 1st that we'll be collecting with that bucket of funds, there's $159,000 shortfall. And those numbers, 214 and 159, are transferred down into the next section at the bottom of this section for this tally sum. And so starting from the top of this list here is the trail ambassador salary reimbursement for 2024. That in the amount that, and that's 2A2 funds, not 2A1 funds, because the county did take action to discontinue the use of 2A1 funds in both 24 and 25 to support trail ambassador salaries. But what was misunderstood to be a continued use of 2A2 funds for that activity is in the amount of $282,000 in 2024, and to date 107,000 in 2025. Which with, in light of the misunderstanding and the correction of that misunderstanding, that would be the amount that would need to be reimbursed out of the general fund into Fund 23. So reimbursement back to the TRT fund.
Okay, can I ask another question? Because I wasn't inside the negotiations. So the way that I remember the audit was that it was originally in 2021, there was $15,000 worth of salaries that were reimbursed. And then in 2022, there was 150 something salaries, and that came up to be about 182,000. And that was 21 and 22. That would mean that we have 24 sitting here in 25. Whereas do we have 2023? Because I thought that the audit came out prior to the 2023 financials being out.
The audit encompassed 2023 as well. And so I would have to get back to you on, I'm operating under the assumption that 182 did get things current.
Cause I thought it was 189 for 2023, and cause I remember when I was looking at the numbers, I was like,
Okay,
wow, those are very close, but they don't add up. And then as I looked further, it was the 182, I think, came from 2021 and 2022.
okay. Well, that sounds like a follow-up item that would be important.
And on that 2025 unplanned general fund expenses to date. Your previous saying that Recreation Special Service District for the previous several years isn't listed in that unplanned expenses. I mean, even with the thoughts that it isn't.
Right, I mean,
fall.
because, I mean, it just simply over the weekend, the state auditor's office, you know, has offered clarifying statements that honestly have been, that are kind of present new understandings for even myself with regards to 2A2 funds.
So we should total that up and put that on that list as an unplanned expense.
Right, and so that's just a matter of, this is
600K.
kind of coming to light over the weekend that now, you know, 2A2 funds also have to serve to, attract transient guests to the community.
That's something that you.
Can we update that document on the fly?
From the auditor.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that.
One other quick question. So the 159,862, the TRT 2A2 shortfall, since that is only projected TRT up through July 1st, is that a half year shortfall or is that extrapolated out for the whole year?
That's the whole, that would be the whole year. So if we were to execute budgeted expenses for the whole year, that would come out to 459.
Okay.
And that, but we'll only bring in 300 through half of the year, and then there's no longer that,
No longer that spot.
that tag. Yeah. And then, so there's just a number of these expenses approved by this body to date that are included in this ledger here, amounting to $1,153,212.
What's the URS contribution increase? Oh, is that the sheriff's thing?
Correct.
Okay, great.
Tier 2 benefit. And so, yeah, that's kind of including the reimbursements and these shortfalls that we're certain, that we're looking, you know, fairly certain that we're looking at based on projections that haven't been updated. This amount represents this 1.1 million is what we would reasonably plan to have to pull from the general fund balance to balance the budget or to make these expenditures.
And that number could change then based off of what you find on the 2023 number that Brian was discussing.
As well as a special service district contribution, correct?
The 137,000. Okay,
Right.
well, I'm just trying to keep
Back how many?
Yeah, at least 3 or 4 years, assuming it's.
I can see forward on their error report. Is it, I don't know if it goes any farther. I wasn't here at that time.
Yeah, I don't know offhand either. I would assume it could be up as much as, you know, $500,000 or $600,000.
Was that brought up during the audit?
I was, no,
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's,
Second.
Yeah.
2021.
I mean, I think asking, but I mean, at least when you do talk to the auditor, make sure I would say, you would bring up that this was not brought up during the audit, so you think that we're okay.
yeah, I no longer feel like I have the luxury to just think I'm okay. I'm not doing.
I'm not asking you to think that you're okay. I'm saying that when you do have that conversation, do bring up the fact that this was not brought up during the most recent audit.
Well, Gabe, what you were saying is maybe the next meeting you would go into it with Stephen and a commissioner or two. So I think, you know, whomever those commissioners are, you know, hopefully we can go to bat. And I agree with you, Brian, like push
It wasn't,
back against
it
that.
wasn't brought up in the audit.
Absolutely.
I feel like we shouldn't be
I mean,
penalized
we've
for it.
pushed back against a lot of that and not had to pay it back, right? Like their original numbers were huge and these guys worked really hard to push back against that. So.
Okay.
Doc and Kevin.
And then, so I also just provided here, a overview of capital project general fund. So that's Fund 334, expenses that have been authorized.
The cattle panels landed at 90. I thought that was 75.
Yeah, it was our budgeted contribution was 80 and there was a cost overrun associated with that project that brought it up to that number.
That cost over was told to me that it was $1,200, not $10,000.
Oh, okay, if that might be an update that I didn't receive.
Okay.
Dana worked with Angie and I think that did change from the 10,000.
And that,
Good.
that's what that's what the manufacturer reported at the ribbon cutting we were at, it was not a 10,000 mark, it was a 1,200 mark.
Okay,
But it was originally 10,000.
It was originally 10,000, but it was taken down to 1,200.
So it's, as far as we know, 81.
Yes,
And then I know things like the Star Hall roof replacement, that was covered by insurance. Am I correct about that?
right, and what's listed here is the portion not covered by insurance.
Oh, is that right? Okay, thanks, Kate. Sorry.
Yeah, and that's okay, and so I went ahead and took our pre-authorized procurement list and I did color coding in here.
Okay.
To give an overview, and so the numbers that are in orange, that I've color coded in orange, are the ones that are transferred into this list here. And basically those are, essentially kind of new and unique. Some of these.
I have a question actually on that for Stephen right there. So, what is it? It's Utah code, you've got a computer in front of you, Utah code 10-6-130 right there. Which is the lapse of appropriations clause.
That states all unexpended or unencumbered appropriations except capital project fund appropriations shall lapse at the end of the budget period.
And so Gabe, my question is this on a cash basis or is this on an accrual basis right here? So we're like, basically, have these guys already gone into contract for these? And we just haven't paid it? Because then they would actually have been recognized in the previous financials, correct? And it wouldn't be right here for under accrual basis. Is right, because we can't take expenses that were approved last year and then we can't just move them over to this year.
I mean,
Is that?
do you want me to respond to that, Gabe?
Yeah.
Like Stevens.
The pre-authorized procurement list, though, is just these are budgeted expenses that the commission signs off on at the beginning of the year. That if it's in budget and purchasing policy is followed and everything comes back according to all of our policies, then the departments can go ahead and make these purchases without secondary commission approval.
Correct.
But so they're not. Some of these have been bought already, but most of them have not because we're only in May.
But they're not expended or encumbered yet.
No,
So
not at all.
that's, so they can't move from 2020.
No, they never do.
Into 2025, and that's what the green is.
If they were approved and appropriated again in 2025.
In 2025, okay, that's what my question is right there, is we're not taking things that weren't approved in 2025 or in 2024, moving them then into the 2025.
Not without an additional round of approval.
That's,
through the
yeah,
budget
I was
process.
just checking on that process right there.
And so, yeah, this is the total here that I've put in at 1.486, 1,486,000. That does include the 600,000 pending allocation that the commission is currently considering, which represents, I believe, half of the cost of the pickleball court playground out at the Old Spanish Trail Arena. So that's kind of that's the sum up of these particular capital expenses that kind of represent unique costs that sort of, it's hard to explain. I think it's useful because they weren't necessarily all already built into the regular budget. It's hard to explain, but I thought it was useful to look at this because it's not encompassing of all the pre-authorized procurement list. But because there are some general fund impacts in green, which are sort of, they were just sort of, they've been carried over from year to year, authorized again from year to year, but also just it's almost like, built into operating costs at this point. It could be considered as such. Any comments or questions?
Okay, some of these items though were already on the capital improvement in your guys' budget, like the Star Hall, the courthouse HVAC, the library HVAC, and the OSTA HVAC. They were already included in the budget from last year, but you have them listed as new expenses.
Yeah, so that's why I'm saying, like, things like the lease trucks for the building department, those were trucks that department already had. And they wanted to be thorough and bring that before the pre-auth list. It was, in that particular case, it might not have even been necessary because there's not an individual, those lease payments are individual on their own, don't amount to more than $5,000. And things like the iWork software, that's just a cost that has been paid for, from year to year. And so it's not necessarily it's not unique to this year. I guess that's what I wanted to really capture here, that I wanted to pull these out as being more unique to this year.
Kind of one-time expenses.
Yeah,
Some of these are ongoing, obviously.
that's probably a better, rather than new expenses, I probably would have done better to say one time. Yeah. Thank you.
So there's one-time expenses. Every year something comes up. I mean, last year we had a rough year with the hailstorm, knocking out a bunch of things like the roof, and some of the HVAC systems. But
And then there's just, so the capital project, what we fund out of that are, there's certain capital buildings and capital equipment are a specific type of, capitalized asset. So that has its own sort of classification. But there are other, I just decided to include other expenses that are on the pre-authorized procurement list, that aren't capital type purchases, but are more, these are one time, or, I'll use that, or I guess new and unique to this year, of larger expenses that were included in the pre-authorized procurement list.
Can we go back to that upper total there, 1,486, 491 number?
Yeah.
Really, that number then is gonna remain fairly accurate within $10,000 that we talked at OSTA, whereas possibly the upper number is gonna change depending on the 2023 that you find, correct?
Right. And so
I'm just trying to make sure that as we go down through here, that these numbers, if there's gonna be any change in them moving forward. So I'm going to, I guess I'm making the statement that 1,486,000 is fairly accurate.
I think
Do you
it's really
see
important.
something different there? I mean, I didn't see anything in there that other than the OSTA cattle panels probably dropping that, right? Coming down another 8 or 10,000.
Right, and I would just also make sure to mention that it does include the 600,000 for the pickleball court, which is still pending approval.
Right. I'm just
But
want to keep track of these totals that we're looking at here.
Yeah.
Thank
can we
you.
also speak for a second about the fungibility between Fund 34 and Fund 10? I know Kevin pointed that out a couple times last year, but those are basically, we can move money between those accounts. Is that right?
It is my understanding that, and I would want to seek clarification from our CPA, from Larson, just to make sure. But it is my understanding that we can transfer funds from Fund 34 back into Fund 10 as needed, but that the transfers out of 10 into 34 over the years have largely been to keep the general fund balance lean according to statute.
Right. So in some sense, expenditures out of Fund 34 could be considered. Sure, I mean, that comes from taxpayer money, basically. It's essentially general fund money.
That's my understanding.
Fund 34 is.
Yeah.
Right, because what is it? You're only allowed to have so much inside.
Exactly.
Up and over, and then it goes into your capital projects.
So it's the same money. But we're able to
We can
fund
move
34 as a
money.
bank.
Move money around.
It doesn't have a fund balance limit, but as long as it's tagged, as long as those funds are.
Almost like a checking account and a savings account, right?
Yeah, I think that's a useful way of looking at it. Yeah.
So do we have a restriction limit on Fund 34?
No, it's because it is for capital, because you can build up they allow counties to build up a lot of money in a fund like that to make large, say a very large facility payment or a down payment, for example.
But we know that the allowable expenses, capital works, buildings, etc.
Right.
Out of that fund, okay?
Yep.
But still, like Jacques said, taxpayer.
I
It's
think it's
all
just
taxes.
worth noting that it's not like, capital projects, we have plenty of money in that, we can just.
Yeah, or like, it's kind of unrestricted, And in that sense, you know, sort of unrestricted property tax and sales and use tax that don't have the same restrictions on them, yeah.
Looking at that pre-authorized list. Maybe someone on the commission here can inform me. What was the decision last year about the vehicles? I thought that during the budget, you guys took the new vehicles off of the list and that departments were going to come as the vehicles. Was that correct?
That's the way I wrote it.
That's how I remember it as well.
Yeah, I remember.
So I'm just wondering why there's 100,000 worth of vehicles on this list then.
Which list are you looking at, the pre-op list?
Which department, Brian?
Well, it's between GCAT and OSTA.
We can start off, we can go with the building department has two
Oh, yeah.
trucks and then you come on down.
Sure.
Sheriff's got one, GCAT's got three.
Is that from the previous year that we still haven't?
I'm not sure, that's why I'm just asking.
I'm not sure either.
I don't know how they are. Rhodes has got leased vehicles, Osta's got some vehicles and a tractor on there.
And OSTA has stage training that I thought we were city part.
I added it up just real quick, it was about 100,000.
They have to be existing leases.
They were existing.
We have not approved any new leases.
And the 8,000, we were partnering, I mean, it's low number there, but the OSTA stage training of 8,000. I thought that was a city's contribution for their use of the stage. We already have a trained person. They
I
wanted.
think it was a city contribution. I think we had discussions that they were half ownership of the stage and that we hadn't been billing them
Yeah,
for any of its use. So I think this just goes on the tally of the cost of the stage, and at some point, we're gonna have to bring the city into a discussion and
Surprised no one's from the city is here with all the talk they've been doing about our budget.
no, really.
Do you remember Angie asking?
We had one, city was supposed to have one too, and we were supposed to have two. Going forward, this was, I mean, since I've been here, that talk's been going on.
Two stages or?
No, two individuals from each under insurance, you have to have a staff member or a trained staff member to set that thing up.
Yeah,
And they have set it up a few times using our staff.
right. And one of the major issues that's causing is the stage is used and it's shipped around. And as long as to keep it under the liability and the coverage, they have to be trained. And each party or the city and the county were both supposed to have two individuals that were trained to do it. And it's quite a substantial undertaking because they have to remain on site while they're doing the setup and the tear down. And if it gets sent out to wherever it goes, they have to track. And so I know that's been a area of improvement to have additional individual training. The training's a couple grand.
It's big, yeah.
Training's no joke, but
And Greg's the only one who can do it right now. right?
Greg's the only one that could do it.
Guardrails.
yeah.
And I know it's only $8,000, but
About $800 right now, but we really.
Yeah, I think we need to bring it back to the actual discussion of the budget, but I think that admin could look at that as adding to our talks with the city, that we've got a little list of things we're working on. But yeah, I'm sorry, Gabe, if I hurted you there, but let's come back to that.
And as far as you wanting to clarify the solidity of these numbers, I think there very well could be some further clarification that needs to be pulled out to make sure that these would be solid. This will be a process. We obviously want to make sure we're really accurate. But I thought it was important to kind of at least get some kind of overview that gave us a pretty decent idea of what sort of work we've committed to this year.
It is very important. Thank you.
And then I would just back to the point of the vehicles, I'd like to make sure that these vehicles are not new leases and that they are just ongoing leases, as Steve mentioned, that if they are new purchases, I think they need to be discussed. Well, I don't think so. I think that we agreed that they would be brought forward to the commission.
And just one further recommendation, I think, just for the process of today, I mean, I'd really like to be able to at least get down to a red line. So we kind of know exactly where we're sitting. And I think that would be kind of between these budgets right here, of where we're gonna have to transfer, what's possible. And then also there was the question of the reserve balance. That I had brought. Have you had any time to look into that yet, Gabe?
No, I haven't. No. As far as The reserve balance, can you be more specific?
Yeah, the reserve balance of GCAT, the 1.6 right there from the balance we were talking about
Yeah.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I still need to dig into that.
Because that's going to determine how we can make some of these decisions. As well as Steve's interpretation of how we'll be able to spend that money. You know, where that can be spent.
And so finally on this chart, this is the overall amount in the general fund, that we budgeted in expenses and revenues, that 22 million. And so that just gives a wider angle snapshot of the scale and the volume that we're of a typical operating year as it's been in the past couple of years. And then fund balances for both the general fund, Fund 10, and the capital project Fund 34. And these numbers quoted for the end of 2024 was a budget year. And then this 9,466,000 represents that fund balance less the 1.1 million, which is subject to change based on further conversations. And so with all of these committed funds, we come out to these would be the updated fund balances, taking those numbers out. This less total capital expenses does not include the non-capital pre-authorized expenses, so that. This 6,954,000 less total capital expenses and is 5,468,000. That doesn't include this 333 that was built into this budget because they're not capital expenses. I wanted to just keep this specific to capital expenses. And also these because these aren't capital, these don't come out of Fund 34, they come out of Fund 10. I think that's the main reason why I wanted to keep that balance there. So I'm just pointing out that this 333 isn't factored into these calculations down at near the bottom. And this I added this line at the bottom. This is the amount of $182,000, which was already reimbursed, plus this 282 and 107. That's the summation of those three figures. That comes out to 571,000. And so that we know for certain, and there's going to be further analysis to determine if there are other 2A2 restricted funds in fund.
That's 21, 22, and 23 as well. Correct.
Correct.
Yep.
And so this we know this 571 is an amount of TRT funds that are restricted to 2A2 that were reimbursed for trail ambassadors. So we know that there is that amount of money available for that use in the fund balance, in the Fund 23 fund balance.
So it was already reimbursed, or it needs
182,000 was reimbursed. And then the remainder of that was be recorded in the budget amendment so that compliance can be achieved. But I thought it would be useful to point that out.
Reimbursed from the general fund then?
Correct. And so, but again, that 571,000,
We're not sure.
I'm very uncertain about what is even an allowable use of that. I have to use the restroom, so I'll allow you all to.
Definitely understand. We're several to take a break.
Take breaks.
I'll have a question. Take a break. We'll be here.
You guys want recess?
Recess for 5 minutes? Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so
Call the recess.
Okay, we're gonna recess for 5 minutes. We'll break.
and we'll return at
Return at
9:35.
9:35.
Can we get back?
Rating until 9:35. Yeah, no, we're good.
All right, we will resume our discussion here and try and keep moving forward. Yes, Michael?
Just on that bottom line, that TRT 2A fund balance reimbursement, the 571,373. It has a plus quotation mark 600K from Recreation Special Service District. So it would be right about 1.2
That would be
in the
my
thought
current-
process there.
that would be my current understanding, correct?
And yes, we're just letting the commission know I have to be incredibly rude and go to court at 10 o'clock. So I'm letting you guys know now that I'm gonna be stepping out. I did circulate the previous memo with a heads up and a note on that. My takeaway from this is definitely we're gonna create another memo kind of reflecting on the current circumstances of the law. And the analysis will have to be kind of a bifurcated process. One, we're gonna look at TRT revenues that were collected before the new effective date of HB 456, and then one preceding that. My understanding, and I could be wrong, my understanding is the funds that we collect within that window are still gonna be applicable, even if we receive those funds, the receipts come in a couple months later, that's gonna still have the obligations that the prior law was up until the point where the law changes over. So there'll be two separate analysis on that. And then additionally, I'm happy to work with the clerk auditor and another commissioner on the meeting for the follow-up. And so I just want to note those two things are what I'm taking away from this at this time. But if you guys have questions, if you could ask them before 10 o'clock, then I'll go back and watch the rest of the meeting. So you guys don't have to worry that I won't do that. So if something comes up, just say, hey, Stephen, pay attention to this and I'll jump on it.
Thanks, Steve. And you did say you sent that memo out previous?
I actually didn't. I asked
Okay.
Chrissy Hoffines and she emailed it and then I put on the stereotypical, hey, this is advice from an attorney, this is confidential, please don't circulate, share this.
But I'm not seeing it.
It's at the top of the inbox.
Yeah, it's there.
Okay. Quick question with that.
Yes,
Would
Commissioner.
it be
Even at 9:10.
in the end, would it be best defensible or to your department and you're teaming up with clerk auditor to follow current rules as to July 1st? Like not, if we have to pay back, not following separate rules as we go back in time to different standards, would it be best for you to follow current July 1st standards?
There's gonna be.
You gotta do
two, Mike.
You gotta do two.
Yeah, we're gonna be, because they're so different.
They're just so different.
Yeah,
We're gonna probably have to go through line by line and look and be like, hey, is this right here gonna be an expense that we can say brings people in or doesn't bring people in? And then we'll have to go to the next one. Does this bring people in? Does
Okay.
it not bring people in? Helps to figure that out.
And again, as the attorney, my job's not to tell county exactly what to do. Instead, I'm giving advice. I'm telling you guys, here's the memo, here's the information. You guys are creating policy for the county to follow. So that's where when I say that it'd be great to have information about programming, information about the particular projects. Without some of that information, I don't know that. So I think it'd be wise probably to either have, depending on how detailed you guys go through this meeting, to have a subcommittee or some other working group to be able to highlight, identify, tag, flag any of these items that you're like, hey, look, this is kind of an odder expense. This is drifting further away from maybe, more comfortable land into, more gray territory. And you guys could follow up and ask me about that. But I don't want to be in the position where I'm sitting here saying for staff what to do and not do. That's what I've always, it's not my place. And that's why, and same for the auditor, it puts us in a funky spot. And I don't want to speak for the auditor. Our goal is again to advise and get the commission to make decisions. So a team probably that comprises of myself, the auditor, Mark, I think would be a wise thing to consider. And of course, the director of any of the departments that you're looking at changing any of the expenditures.
I mean, I do think your opinion's extremely important though, because this is interpretation, right? And that's where the struggle comes in for me. It's like the state auditor isn't an attorney,
Sure.
Right? And so their interpretation of code is, yeah, anyways, so
And
I'll keep rubbing my
Certainly
head.
aren't apolitical either.
Right.
And one thing to remember again is that the hard thing is the role of both my spot and the auditor's spot is to avoid getting in
Sure.
a lawsuit. And there's a famous idea that anybody can sue anybody for any reason, whether they're going to go to a trial on the merits and be successful is a completely different conversation. But if we want to be in a realm of, the safest, that's why attorneys want to bubble wrap everything and protect everything. So that's why I'll do a memo, provide you guys additional information and do that. So other questions for me? Otherwise, I'm here listening.
Thank you.
So I would have a question. What does the Recreation Special Service District contribution, they only do kids sports, or does that money go to OSTA for other events? Because that obviously, we bring in tourists that come in the area, so it's like, what is those,
Well, they
Softball.
paid for the doors on the
the doors on the building? So I mean, anyways, I mean, yeah, if it's paying for only the kids, it's the only thing the Recreation Special Service District does is do kids sports.
It's not just.
It's not there, but if it's only 20% of the budget, and this particular 20% of the budget is going toward those things that are fixing up the arena, the doors, those things that, because this says right here that it, in order to attract or enhance transient guest expenditures, so.
There's the word. There's the rub, that enhance.
That's
Most the doors might
that's-
be
that's the
mitigating the
new bill.
impacts.
That's not, that doesn't apply to the.
Right. I understand. I know.
All right, we gotta be careful. We're talking over the top of each other here, and when people are following us on Zoom and the recording, it's hard to follow, but Gabe did just mention an important fact, if you wanna give that to us again.
Well, just, I think that, I think we just need more clarification, or we need to the commission needs to create a position supported by the attorney
Yes.
about, what it is confident these uses are, how it is confident that these uses are consistent with code in its interpretation.
Doesn't that follow under the scope of audit committee?
No, that's a totally different audit.
Okay,
That's our annual internal audit,
That's internal.
not the audit.
Raised by.
Do you have the TRT 2A2 pulled up in the code? I think it might be helpful if we actually just read it real quick, guys.
Old or new?
The current one right now, not the new one, because there is no 2A2 in the new one.
Correct.
Yeah.
I'll pull up the.
Thanks, yeah, I think it might be helpful just to read that and see what it exactly says. Maybe that'll give us some light on what those uses might be.
So we're looking at Utah Code annotated 17-31-2. And then subsection 2A, and I'll read through it. So it's subject to the requirements of this section. County legislative body may impose the transient room tax for the purposes of A, establishing and promoting Roman numeral I, tourism, or Roman numeral II, recreation, film, production, and conventions. Is that the one you'd like?
Pretty broad strokes there.
Really vague. That's the new one.
No, that's-
No, that's the
one.
old one.
The old one, this is.
That's why, yeah.
And for folks trying to follow along online on the exciting nature of reading legislative code, the new, when we keep saying the new, what we're referring to is HB 456.
Yeah.
And that, for folks that don't know, that is a bill that's been passed, signed by the governor, and will be enacted in effect starting the 1st of July. And so all of the language in HB 456 will change what it is that we are going to be looking at when we look at TRT expenditures for tax dollars that are brought in after that July 1st date. So that's where we're kind of straddling when we talk about the two worlds. For folks following along, that's what we're doing. We're comparing current 17-31-2 Utah Code annotated with HB 456.
And then just for my clarification and maybe just kind of catch everybody else up. So the way that I believe that it went is it came down to the definition of establishing and promoting right there. And that's where the question is. And so in that establishing and promoting, the idea is it has to be bringing people from the outside in.
So
In the
When we-
old law.
In the current,
The
this is
new
this, No, the current, the current law, that's what we're talking about right here. I think we should kind of skip HB 456 right now. Let's not talk about it. Because what we're focusing on right now is this TRT 2A2.
Can you repeat
right
what
now, I
you
think,
just said,
that we're looking at.
Brian? So how do you,
And that's,
your interpretation of establish and promote?
it's not my interpretation.
Okay.
I wanted to find out, I believe that the interpretation of the state auditor was that establish and promoting meant bringing people from the outside in.
Right,
And it's a question, is it?
but again, that's an interpretation of an auditor, not.
I mean, that doesn't say that.
Well, they still are the authority that we are operating.
No, I understand, I understand.
We agreed to that, so let's just make sure that we all are on the same footing right there.
But I guess the point I'm trying to make is it's complex, right? And
It is, and that's why I'm trying to clarify it right now.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, I mean, when I read establishing and promoting means.
The new HB 456 stuff, you can't, sorry about that.
Oh.
So I have the current code up right now on the screen.
That's fine.
So there's a definition of tourism, which is encompassed under establishing and promoting. The definition of tourism is called out in the code as specifically referring to 2A1.
Yeah, and that's so
Promoting.
some of the rub that we'll have is whenever we don't have a defined term, whenever we have a word that's utilized in statute that doesn't have a defined term, we utilize the normally known meaning of that word at the time that it was drafted. And so when we look at this statute, we look at 2A, which states establishing and promoting. So establishing and promoting is going to modify Roman numeral I and Roman numeral II. And so that's where we have to utilize your standard definition of what establishing is and what promoting is. We go to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, we look at those terms, and then those two things modify independently tourism, and then it independently modifies recreation, film production, and convention. I think where a lot of the concern, if I'm being critical of, legislative drafting, we take the word tourism and then we use the word tourism and give it what we would normally think of. Well, they merge the definition of tourism with establishing and promoting, which kind of rolls back into itself a little bit. But again, looking at what the state auditor said was that they wanted to see promotion specifically on Roman numeral II, for recreation, film production, and conventions. So, go ahead.
So they want recreation, film, and what was the
Conventions.
conventions all to promoting tourism, which is to bring people in.
They wanted it to be, and I'd have to pull up their letter. They wanted it to be establishing and promoting those individual items as well, which that wasn't something that was focused on originally based on the state auditor's position to bring other people into the county. That was their rub with it.
So I'm not gonna go to the previous, so never mind.
I have a question about just, we've talked a lot about rec and trail investors and stuff. Are we clear on film? Are we good on that? We haven't talked about film. It falls under the same category.
Or like the definition of film generally.
Right.
I mean, I think the thing that helps film is the fact that I think almost all films are things that are created and pushed out into the world that is kind of self-promotion is generally what the film industry does. I think that's probably why there hasn't been a lot of, I don't want to say bickering, a lot of disagreement on that item because that's what a film is, you produce, create, push it out.
And I also think that film, less than the idea of the movies that are filmed and how they go out into the world, it's more about bringing the people who film into the in here.
Okay.
And I think that's probably why they moved it from being this 2A kind of like questionable, right, into now it's under the 3A right there, because it really is, it's bringing people from the outside in.
I do just think whenever you guys meet with the auditors, just clarify film too. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Just a point, like they've lumped those three together and I think we just want to make sure that.
And one other note I think would be very helpful is when we meet with the state auditor, I want them to really I want them to really do a full comprehensive look. And so, yeah, it's good. It's like taking the car to the mechanic and you have them look at the engine and then they fix one issue. There could be the feeling of that. And then other items seem, every time you take them back, they just want a little bit more money. So I think it'd be good to get them to make sure that they do, look at that. Broad stroke review would be done.
I agree.
Just my question on that, at least on previous audits, so things that were not caught in the audit previously. We should not have to go retroactive to that, right? Because after an audit, at least in my previous experience with audits, anything that was not found in the audit, you basically have clearing from that point forward.
Well, I don't know.
Like,
Well,
no, I mean, if you were audited on something right there and there's no findings found, right, on that, I mean, we were specifically audited on these accounts. And there's no findings with our recreation special services or our film, right? There was no problems with that. I don't think that you would ask the auditor like, hey, is this right? That, am I considered, or is my understanding?
If I'm putting on my prosecutor hat, if you didn't find illegal action, and this is not the case, I'm giving a completely separate example. If we have a bank robbery and we knew they were doing the bank robbery and we later found out that they had, a drug operation going on, just because we didn't find it first blush doesn't make it not improper, right? So that's where I'm saying it would be good to get a good cleanup bill of health. And I do think that the penalties, I think if they.
These are two separate, I mean, they specifically audited this account.
Correct. But I do think that it is fair to say, look, this is something that you guys missed the first go around. If we missed it too, I think that there's some give and takes there. Do I think that the county is not allowed to expend funds in a way that isn't legally permissible just because somebody else missed it? I think that's another important point, but I think that it makes it harder to say that things were intentional if everybody missed something. So I'm just putting that out there.
I have a statement also that, I mean, this audit was the result of a whistleblower action, and the whistleblower either chose not to or didn't care about the money that went to the rec. And so the auditor didn't specifically look at that, I think, because he wasn't asked to, or it wasn't brought to his attention or their attention. So, I mean, it seems like it would be on the table. And I think, I mean, that's kind of where we're at with the Rec Film Convention. Previously, like, we were spending for the last 6 months, Rec Film Convention money. We went through our budgeting process. We didn't hear from anybody until that meeting the other day. Like, I don't know. I mean, I know the auditor isn't a policeman, but we also didn't get, I mean, we did that with I think, maybe mistaken idea about how that came down, but yeah, it wasn't.
I don't think it hurts to ask clarification.
Of course, right,
For sure.
Yeah, that's stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's wise.
Okay, I think we're back to Gabe.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry for that diversion.
Oh, no, sorry. Let me see, I'll go back to. And so the only other document that I wanted to touch base that was added to the agenda packet yesterday was some broader general overview showing this first chart here shows
The last one, number 3 on
that's agenda item 3.
Anyway, okay, I got it.
And so I'll just touch on this document real quick and then just, not that we're necessarily done with discussion as it relates to agenda item 2. But I just merely want to present information to facilitate y'all's discussion.
In March.
Yeah.
Not enough.
Challenges of making a clean document. And so we have a number of funds and showing actual expenditures and actual revenues dating back to 2021. We have departments within the general fund or the budget categories. Not all of them are exactly departments, but most of them are. And the same sort of analysis other than not revenues, because each department, each department does have their own specific revenues. And it's important to note that a lot of times a spike in expenditures in a given year for a given department is it could be related to expenses that were reimbursed by grants that were temporary. And so that could serve to explain why in a given year, a given department saw a spike in expenditures, but we don't have, that could be sussed out is what revenues are specific to what departments. There is some work that could be done to try to analyze that.
Dave, I got a couple of questions. So, first off, when I went and looked at this, I started at 23 right here. And looking at 23, I see actual expenditures of 26 million and then actual revenues of 27 million. However, when I went and looked at the financials right here, so I went and looked through all these accounts, like when I went through the health services right here, I could see the health insurance, this is what it's called, but I figured that was the health account right there. I mean, it lines right up with what's on the financials. And when I looked at the
top chart, key funds.
Yeah,
These are.
here, and I'll pull it up
These are
to
key,
page.
this is key funds, not the entire budget. So you will not.
No, but
see-
yeah, but hold on one second. So when I look at general, with the general, that's referring to the general fund right
Yep.
there.
Yep.
I mean, when I look at the general fund, I see total expenditures right here on the financial report of 20 million, right? And then I see our total revenues right there of 16.65 plus our transfers in of 5.5. That gets me at about 21. And then when I look at the total surplus right there on the financials, I have a total surplus in 2023 of 72,000. I think that would just be a much better representation of what actually happened in 2023 right there. Then, because when I look at this right here, it looks like we have a surplus of 1.0 million in our general fund.
Some background. This request came from you.
Oh, yeah.
Friday.
I know, I know, yeah.
And I went.
I'm just asking about that because it plays into how the percentage up and down went. So
Well,
I'm not picking on you here.
no,
I'm just-
technically, I just went to Castell Advantage, which is our budgeting application.
Okay,
Our accounting system is Castell Clarity. So these numbers came right out of Castell Advantage. It was like 2 hours worth of hitting buttons and running reports. So I'm not discounting that there could be some.
just wondering why, yeah, I don't know why they don't reconcile that or why they're, so far off. That's my main question right there with that.
But it did come from the budgeting software. So I think that's what's important. This is the budgeting tool, not necessarily what we actually paid through accounts.
I know, but maybe my problem then is the word actual expenditures and actual. So when I saw that, I went and looked at the financials and I'm like, wow, that doesn't line up right there. And then my second question is when you look at 2024 on that up on the top, so you take 21,340,419 and you subtract out the revenues that we pulled in of 19,636, we were $1.7 million over last year,
Over what?
over budget. Our revenues were 19.636, right? And our expenditures were 21,340,000.
I wouldn't say that we were over budget. Because this is just the actual. I don't show what the original budget is. So if we show actual revenue in 2024 for 19.6 million,
Mhm.
budget could have been 22.
It shows that we didn't bring in the money.
It's
I mean, it's not the budget.
I'm sorry, I need to rephrase that. Our expenses were over our revenues by $1.7 million.
and that's what this chart is trying to show you here. And I color coded red, green meaning good.
Good, yeah.
Means more revenue or less expenses, or red. So if anything, if you were to read anything on this chart, it's not to look for precise dollars, but it's look for year over year change.
Yeah.
To see if it's a red number or a green number, just to see how our expenses or revenue has changed. From one year to another.
And if you look
Fund
further
balance
back
on this as well.
from 2021 to 2023, we were
Just to-
under, our expenses were 1 to 2 million under.
There it is. Yeah, but then when you look at, you go down to two things I see right there is you look at the chart number 2 right here. And I mean, like you were saying, color coding tells me that from 2021, basically through 2025, it's red. Right? We've been in the red for 21, 22, 23, 24, 4 years right there.
If I had to make a
That's-
general statement, that's what I was seeing.
Yeah, that's what I look at there. And then when I flip the page over here and I look at the fund balances right here, I see a whole lot of negatives right there in our fund balances. So it seems like what we're doing right now is we're supporting ourselves through our fund balances. Right? And then you look at these charts and every single one of the, what's that? It's this chart right here.
Right, we're drawing them down.
Oh, yeah. And then when we start looking at all of our revenues right here, we start looking at our revenues and, the line that you draw here, which has
Trend line.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the average.
average going down right here, TRT receipts, hospital transient room tax going down, car rental tax receipts significantly going down. Looking at our restaurant receipts going down slightly, right? And then you look at our general sales tax and it's going down as well. So everything is trending down right now. Yet when we looked at our expenses previously, all of our expenses were going up. That's what's really concerning to me right there. And then the 1.7 million right there, it's like, oh my goodness, that's a big number out of our general fund right now. I mean, 10 million sounds like a lot when you put it up, but then when you say, wow, in 1 year, we're 1.7, there is some fear right there for me. I am
I
concerned.
agree, and that's why, the other night we spent, I don't know, 700K more, like I agree with you, and so how do we, start to use more caution? We haven't changed that trajectory, right? This year, we keep on spinning, and so I agree with you, like, so how do we turn that ship? We spent a lot of money just the other night.
I would say that like the capital funds would be our fourth one-time events like that, one-time purchases. It's our ongoing expenses that we have. It's all of our.
But we added a large ongoing expense the other night also, so I agree with you, but we've already talked about.
The economic development
Yep.
position.
Yep.
Talking about.
Yep. So.
Which will likely fund itself. I don't think that's apples to grapes.
I know, but it was already in the budget.
Economic development
Yeah,
position was already in.
economic
It was
development was
already.
already in the budget, because you guys, we funded it with TRT previously, with the assumption that we were going to back pay it with general funds. That was,
Okay.
that was.
The overall objective
Yeah,
is
yeah.
we need to
No, I
start,
I agree with you.
I think we agree.
Yeah, totally agree with you on that.
Okay, thank you. We gotta write that down, Brian. We gotta memorialize that. I think we do. I think we do.
Okay, where are we?
Where are,
Well, I wanted to make the comment that you just made. The numbers don't look good. I mean, we're contracting. So there's three things we can do. One, cut costs immediately. Or try to improve our revenues. Or take money from surplus to help pay for this year. And I think that's just what you guys all have to kind of figure out how we address this.
Great overview. Got to grow the top line, got to, figure out how we can tighten up the bottom and see how we can make everything last.
And I would go back to this sheet, Gabe. I just think that we've really got some holes in here that need filled in, where we are talking 2023. Some clarity on the rec special service district money. Some clarity on the GCAT where the 100,000 and 648. I just think that we're talking enough here by the time it's done of almost $1 million, if not over, that we need some clarity on before we can go through and start deciding
And
what we want to do.
And just to add in there as well, just that 1.6 GCAT reserve as well, because
Right.
we need to just figure out what our red line is, where we're sitting at first before, at least myself, I need to know what we exactly have before we can go ahead and start making any kind of informed decisions. What our fund balances are and where we're sitting on becoming compliant.
we're back on the first.
And I guess for my part, I would say that, we need to give, enough time needs to be given, as you all are suggesting, to make sure that we're operating with accurate numbers and data and analysis. But I think it's pretty clear in this meeting, in this public meeting, the intent of this body has been made clear that there's an effort to comply. We're gonna get to the bottom of it. We're going to be, we're gonna be forward and making sure to achieve that. And I don't want us, it would be my hope that we wouldn't decide to rush an amendment process before letting all the hard work that'll need to be done to do follow-up analysis and clarity. And so I just want to make sure that we're focusing on that accurate side, now that our stated intent has been made clear as far as the compliance piece.
Oh,
Go ahead, Mike.
sorry. I agree not to rush any of these decisions, but in 2 months, 3 months, we start our budget season. We need to know and fix what we can coming into our future budgets. Into our 2026 budget season.
And just one more thing real quick, Mike. I mean, just, taking aside the structural deficit that we were just talking about prior, right? I think more importantly, and the purpose of this right here, at least in my mind, is that we need to be compliant by July 1st. Because starting July 1st, the state is collecting that 0.25 tax, right?
Yeah.
And I really think that the state is trying to lead us into compliant with the carrot rather than with the stick right here. Right, so if we can make sure that we're compliant starting July 1st, we will be eligible for all that essential funding for all those essential services, our EMS grants, all of those mitigation grants that are there. And I think that's really what our target or goal should be, is to make sure that we are compliant by July 1st.
I think that what Gabe is saying, because I know that Bill had planned to do a budget workshop at the beginning of our meeting next Tuesday. And I think that might be too soon to have, if that's what Gabe might be saying, that might be too soon to have all of these answers back from this page. We've got Recreation Special Service District, we've got the expenditures due to trail ambassadors, if it's just salaries or if it's all of the other things. We need the memo from Stephen. We want to check on the ongoing leases. There's a lot of different information that we're asking. I don't know if by next Tuesday is too soon. And so we want to maybe pick a different date to workshop. Is that kind of what you're asking, Gabe?
But we can certainly have a plan on having a check-in workshop. I'm just more, what I'm maybe more referring to is like opening up a public hearing and doing the official formal action as it relates to a budget amendment. But I think the commission, taking official action to direct a transfer to achieve compliance and otherwise just openly discussing this and making clear intent. Certainly I wouldn't want to put the brakes on that. I would want to, but I'm just saying, like, this formal process, I want to just make sure that we give this enough time. I've got a lot of other stuff going on as well, and this tends to really put the brakes on all the other duties I have. So I'm just I'm pleading for your patience in that regard.
I'd like to have it amended by July 1st.
Well, that would mean that we would need a public hearing on Tuesday.
We would need on Tuesday.
Yeah, because then the official amendment would take place in the second meeting in June. And so it may be, perhaps you would consider an action item in an upcoming commission meeting in June that sort of makes an official declaration of the transfer to be directed that would be included in the formal budget amendment. That's just a suggestion.
Good idea.
The other thing I think that is important at this point, Steve, Gabe, I don't care who or where it comes from, but I believe that every department needs notification that these graphs show that this county is trending down and that their budgets need to follow a downward graph, right? I think that needs to go out. I don't think we want to wait until we have our first budget meeting here. And I don't even know who's the first presenter that we will deal with and then say, oh, but we really need to be looking at a negative. I think all departments across the board need to understand that county revenues are going down and we want them prepared to look at a downward trend in their budget requests.
And I would request, Stephen and I want us to be able to focus on presenting and preparing information as directed, and that'll help you all make a decision. But, I think at this point, it's important for you all to work with your office in and, directing and executing, I definitely don't see that as Steve and I's role. And I know you respect that, but.
No, yeah, and I didn't mean that it was your role at
Right.
all, and so I would agree that then that should probably come from our administrator. I'm just saying that it needs to go out regardless of whose responsibility it is. So that we don't come up start working through somebody's budget and they've got a request in there for an additional, whether it be 1% or 10% in their budget, that they need to be aware now that that's not really likelihood, that it should be looking the other direction. And so I guess I'm asking that. Maybe push back and we're gonna do that and then help us with that. And I respect that, Gabe. I wasn't assuming that it was your duty. I just think it's important that everybody be aware of where we are within our budget process. So do we have, where next do we want to go through you said we weren't quite done with number 2 on the agenda.
Well, I guess I didn't want to pass over any additional discussion that might need to occur. I think that, I kind of really wanted to get this information out and get some of this idea of, the intention here to get into compliance and that ongoing conversation that'll need to happen. But any other sort of suggestion as to action that might need to end up on the next commission agenda with regards to, that I would sort of leave that open to you all to discuss any finer points.
I'll go ahead and volunteer myself if I'd be able to work with yourself and Stephen in making some of those determinations.
Okay. And then Gabe, back to when you and I had a discussion in admin previously before we put all this together. I do see here on there that allocation that is, I think he said 1.6 million. I think we really need to get to the bottom of that. You and I discussed it a little bit. I have here in my notes, but I have question marks around it, so.
Yep, that's on my list here.
Okay,
There's just
appreciate it.
on Fund 47 is where it's listed on the fund balance, it's just for anybody else, it's like.
Yeah, it's in the financial statements right there,
Yeah.
reserve.
Dave, does that include grant funding as well?
They're restricted funds, but we don't know what kind of restricted funds they are. They could either be, I think they could either be grant funds, it could be option sales tax, or they could be TRT rec building convention. And so we just need to know what the makeup of that is. As well, inside of the TRT reserve account, we need to know what the makeup of that account is as well. Instead of just saying, it's just a straight, it's a restricted fund, as you look through the financial statements, to know exactly how that money can be spent would be very helpful.
And then I'd like to just go back, I think it's to the very first, maybe it wasn't, this sheet that we had here, Gabe.
Yeah.
And just to make sure that we are accounting for the earned interest as we're going through here, and I see that you've got that
Same way.
on that line that has a shortfall of 159,862, but then over in the blue, you have projected earned interest income of 122,644.
What sheet was
On that.
I don't quite follow what that means there, yes.
Oh, yeah, got it.
Because that's, the 2B to 2D TRT, the mitigation side as we refer to it, that's in Fund 26. And so that's a different fund through those funds are administered in Fund 26, and these 2A2 funds are administered out of Fund 23. So the earned interest piece that is in blue here as a revenue projection is included on that side as a part of Fund 26, but not in the 2A2 side. And there is a budgeted interest income for Fund 23 as well.
Okay. And you're just catching those, I guess, is my question.
About it's a really good idea. It took me a minute, when I was going through the financials to understand the ins and outs of it. But now that I see how that earned interest is working, it makes a lot of sense.
So if it seems like we have some, you know, Stephen and I have some analysis to do, it sounds like there's some ongoing discussion that'll need to be set up with the attorney. But as for that, you know, I defer to you all for further discussion as needed, or.
So what are we looking at right now? We're looking at Stephen's gonna put some research into putting a memo out, so we have a little bit better idea about interpretation.
Correct.
And of both the old and the new TRT bills. And we are gonna have a future workshop. Are we gonna do a workshop at the next meeting? Is it too early? It sounds like it might be premature, but maybe the week after that, we could have one.
And Gabe, what do you think about on timeline of us going through and solidifying basically what the red line is? Finding out where we are between me, you and Stephen.
Yeah, I think that, you know, we can put a placeholder in for a discussion or, you know, a short workshop for next Tuesday, just to provide some updates as needed.
Do you guys have time this week that we might be able to get together to sit down for an hour and kind of go through that and just maybe look at that?
What red line are you talking about?
Well, we have questions on fund on that $100,000 paying back right
Yeah.
there. We also have questions on, you know, 21, was it 21, 22, and 23, 24, and 25 that we're paying back? Or are we paying back just, right? There's a couple of questions that were originally discussed. We said that we would have a small little group that would get together and go through that. Then we also had questions on, is it just salaries or is it salaries and programming? So that's
That's what we're working on with the auditor for clarification.
I think Stephen,
Yeah.
Brian.
I'd like to join that group if that's possible. I think it'd be, I actually worked with the auditor last year also on that stuff.
Thanks, good to have a couple of you guys.
Yes, Mike?
I want the Recreation Special Service District contribution. And the previous year's 100%
I think.
looked at.
I think everybody does, yeah.
Yeah,
We want to get, we
want to clarify that
Yeah, so
as I.
when can the four of us then get together so
I
that we
have quite good availability.
The four of you can work that out, but do you think this can happen so that we could?
Prior to next Tuesday.
Workshop at the
I think
I think that that's reasonable.
next meeting, and then we'll be able to at least update the public somewhat and
I think that would be good. That would be advisable. Yeah. And
okay.
3 o'clock, 2:30,
when
3:30.
Next Tuesday before our meeting, 3 o'clock.
before the meeting.
No,
Yeah.
but aren't you guys gonna get together before that meeting?
Yeah, they are, but we, Quinn is asking and how
We're
much
gonna do
time
the
we
day-
want in that.
On the day of the commission.
Yeah,
For an update.
For an update.
Okay.
Let's,
3:30.
And
let's
also,
win more.
3:30.
Exact same thing.
2:30.
we also want to try to see if we can get the assistance of either Seth Overson or the state auditor to be at that as well.
You guys can check that out. Good idea.
I would think that we maybe would want to do it based on their availability rather than our availability.
I mean, I'm just looking at my calendar, but I think I'm pretty good.
You're gone all day.
I would say we want to schedule an hour workshop.
Yeah, like, watch yourself.
Tomorrow, going to Dolores.
Thursday's super wide open for me. That'd be a great day. Friday's a little
Winter
less so.
Stevens.
Thursday, Friday, Monday,
Tuesday.
Tuesday. It's all good for me. I just want to, I think I can make it work. It's just maybe we want to contact the
Yeah.
state auditors and find out if they're able to help us and provide a little bit of assistance.
In the meeting with just the small meeting,
Correct.
correct?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Just
think that
making
would
sure
just
I'm
really be helpful. I mean, because if we're
And if they're
looking at what's gonna trigger something or what's not, I think it would be nice to have them
I
sitting there.
recommend it not be Monday.
And then
Okay.
plan and gave 3:30 on Tuesday.
I put 3 o'clock.
Okay.
And if they are available to come to our workshop too, that'd be great. I know you're gonna have to,
Yeah.
you're gonna make time for them, but to invite them to come,
Absolutely.
so that'd be. a workshop.
So as far as so looking down the road, it looks unlikely we'd have a budget amendment on an agenda before the, whatever it is, July 1st is, we have a meeting.
No, we have to,
Yeah.
we'd have to
Public
have a public hearing,
Right.
right?
Yep.
So potentially the public hearing could be the second meeting in June. I would say no later than the first meeting in July, and we can.
Yeah.
Make that formal process, but there's nothing stopping you all from taking formal action to direct in a way that makes very clear.
So I just wanted to throw this out there, but the last 3 years, we haven't had a meeting that first week in July. Doesn't mean we can't, but a lot of people in the county are gone during that week. So it's a tough one. But that, I'm not making comment.
Need to fix that.
What I think, yeah, that's always a good point.
Maybe this is on just a whole different topic, but where are we at with the financials?
We're still, we're still in ongoing, I'm working with Larson today. It's something I have to prioritize right after the meeting. And it's, we're head down on it. But as far as, there's not a like a completed draft that's been reviewed yet or anything.
And I guess the part of what my questioning is we've been held up by our component units or like this recreation special district in the past. Where are we at with them?
We've reached out to them with that deadline.
Okay, they're understanding
Yes.
that they have a deadline this year? Okay.
Yes, we've communicated that.
Yeah, I wasn't questioning how hard you're working on them, Gabe. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't anything that was lacking regarding these outstanding districts that we're needing for you to finalize that. But what is the deadline for our financials then? With the state?
June 30th.
You buy the first.
June 30th, I believe.
Yeah.
June 30th, okay. Well, do we have anything else?
We all have our test.
What's that?
I said, we all have our task. Mel, I will get 100% the breakdown from Recreation Special Service District on what was devoted to OSTA, what the money was used for. I'll get that.
I think that would be important for Stephen's memo, because if we can state specific things inside of those funds, what that fund being, they can use, they have the big budgets, so as long as the funds that we're giving for the TRT money have to have specific parameters for all of the different.
And do we seeing that they're a topic here too, have they returned their financial information yet? Mark, Dave? Sorry, Recreation Special Service System. Have they returned their
I don't.
financial
Is
information?
Jim chair still?
I don't believe we've received any
Jim's still chair.
that I'm aware of.
Okay, I will call Jim post meeting today.
And just one more, I know we talked about this a whole bunch, but so July 1st, the law goes into effect, but technically, we're not going to be receiving that money until October, right? That additional 0.25% or that tax.
I did the.
So we have expenditures that are gonna be like July, August, September, but our money comes in October. So we have till then to spend the money in the old law and then the new laws after October?
No.
No,
New law.
on July 1st, we start changing what we do. So
Totally.
even though we're bringing in money based upon the old law, the old taxes, it still starts July 1st.
Correct.
Double checking.
Well, but revenues collected before July 1st should be allowable to expend under so the money that we get until August, we can spend under the prior law because those represent revenues collected before July 1st. I've just talked to Stephen about this. That's my understanding.
Okay, just double checking.
But you're right, Melody, the new tax won't go into effect till October 1st.
But we have to start spending accordingly July 1st.
Or revenues that we get for July, yes,
Yeah.
which we won't know those revenues until September.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also gonna be very confusing because
Yeah.
we're gonna have two pots of money basically that have to live inside of one account. So the accounting of it's gonna be very difficult to be dealing with.
You-
Like I mentioned before, just like food,
Yeah.
first in, first out. So we gotta use up all the money of the prior years.
Stephen, when do we expect to get the April financials or April taxes?
April, on the 20, or usually it's around the 24th, 22nd to 24th of every month.
So we're looking at 3 more weeks from.
We have anything else? We see any reason to not adjourn this meeting?
No, it's
Adjourn it.
good work.
I heard.
I just want to make sure that everybody's got questions answered.
No, I think I think this is very helpful as far as clarifying.
Thank you for
Second
all of the
table.
work over.
Yes, thank you, Gabe.
Yeah,
Steve.
Stephen, thanks. I
Thank you for all of
I
the work.
appreciate you getting that done, even though I sent that in on Friday.
All right, with that being said, I'll adjourn this meeting at 10:20.